Good afternoon. Hope you all had a good lunch. One more announcement. I know you're probably sick of me saying these things now, but because of the slight delay today, there's the ASC training for the ISO 2700 is scheduled in the Bobek room at 3 o'clock now. So if you're going to be part of that training, it's at 3 o'clock in the Bobek room. Next up, as I'm not a native Hungarian speaker, but he just told me his name was a bit complicated. To be honest, what he told me is even more complicated, so I'll just stick to Dr. Boldizsar Benchat. He said he translated that to Dr. Boldi Krisis, which I think that's even more of a tongue twister. But since 1999, he's been a member of the Laboratory of Cryptography and System Security. His research interests are network security, including DOS attacks, spam, malware, botnets, and virtualization. Boldizsar led the team in the Krisis lab that investigated the Duqu malware and also participated in the research of the Flame malware, which leads us on to the title of his presentation, so I'll hand it over to him. Take it away.
So hello everybody, my name is Boldizsar Benchat, as you have heard, and I am from a small research lab called Krisis at the BME, the Budapest University of Technology and Economics. Small means that we are only something like 4 permanent members, 5 PhD students and some undergraduate students working on different topics. And of course, today I will talk about our investigations in the last year, particularly Duqu, Flame and some others. And not to be boring for those who already participated in one of the conferences I attended or I spoke, the current topic is extended in a way that what makes similar analysis processes different and strange and problematic compared to the normal malware analysis process. Of course, as we don't regularly do anything in the malware area, so it's not a traditional area of the laboratory, that's hard to tell exactly what is the difference, but I guess I can give you some ideas about our work and how it is different. So first of all, I begin with the introduction. That means what happened in the last year in the laboratory on the field of targeted malware. So our story, of course, begins with the Stuxnet. I guess I don't have to introduce you this piece of malware. It is targeted, and although it infected 10,000 of computers, the real target was to attack the Iranian nuclear program, particularly through PLC code, modifying the PLC code, break down the uranium centrifuges in particular facilities. Of course, this is a game changer, a historical moment that we had Stuxnet. It is very hard to tell why, because there are other pieces of malware campaigns targeted to different folks, like Chinese are most likely behind some attacks in the US and the Western Europe. Others are attacking companies. Industrial espionage is by computers and cyber means is always growing and so on. But still, Stuxnet is something new because it really belongs to something like cyber war, but it is very hard to define. Our story began after that. In just about 1 year ago, we found Duqu. How it began? We got a call from a company. We only tell that it was a European company, that they have some problem there. They have a breach and they need some help. And we helped, but the main goal was to recover normal operation, contain the infection, find out what are the infected computers and similar. And it was not the priority one goal to find out what tools have been used in that particular attack. But we were very curious, and we are actually a research lab, sometimes having such consulting work, and we started to work on that for our own interest, and looking on the forensics material, what can it be, and so on, as it was already suspicious, it is strange from the day one, because it contained so many strange motifs, like you from the behavior point, you try to check Google for the particular command and control server for information, and you found nothing. You try to find out what type of malware is that does not start immediately, just waits 15 minutes before starting to operate on the computer, and we found nothing similar by Google. And of course, alone one such fact is not so interesting, but altogether a strange collection of different strange things made us already curious about what's happening. But it took some time to finally get the samples, some weeks, and after that it took some time to get permission to work on that, and finally we started to work on that, and we figured out that we have some strange problem here, because Duqu is very similar to Stuxnet. And that was a very interesting point, and of course we were frightened. Oh, what's happening? There's some agency, some secret services behind this operation, what to do now? So we discovered Duqu, and we named it because it uses some temporary files that begin with ~DQ, and it was funny to use Duqu because it is Count Dooku from the Star Wars sequel, the part 2. The first is Stuxnet, but we have part 2 character, and Duqu count at the end dies, and that's another good point, because of course they don't really use Duqu anymore, or who knows. So we found that it has striking similarities with the Stuxnet malware. What sense? It does not contain any PLC code. It has a completely different objective. It is an info stealing malware. A modular one, we know that there is this keylog module that can record keystrokes, screenshots, or just get files for the attackers. But it is capable to load any type of module. So we cannot really say that it is not connected to the industrial control systems. It is capable, because any type of module can be downloaded to the victim computer, of course. But internally, it has striking similarities like the design philosophy, the internal structure, mechanisms, details, and the fact that it is using digitally signed driver for attacking a victim. I mean that for Duqu, we only know about something like 20 different victim sites, and possibly multiple computers at each site. But from these, the kernel driver, for example, is recompiled almost all the time, and had a different name to be under the radar totally. So they use different CNC servers for each target, and possibly even dedicated personnel. So the victims are most likely super high profile victims to be attacked. They really wanted to get some information. For most of the victims, we know they are connected with Iran in some sense, and therefore we think that Duqu was also created by the Stuxnet team because it looks so similar, and the operation is also similar. Otherwise, we could have told that okay, this malware is very similar. That may be just a copy operation by somebody who already knew about Stuxnet, reverse engineered, and made it again. So. Digitally signed driver was only used in one case, and it was actually the case of our victim. And digitally signed driver means that it is not a bad signature, not with a bad hash function. It is really made by a stolen key. And the stolen key is from Taiwan, a Taiwanese company. And at the time when we worked on Duqu, there were only 3 such cases. 2 cases for Stuxnet, again from Taiwanese companies, for J-Micron and Realtek, and this one is from C Media. So, of course, there are no proofs, no 100% proofs in the forensics and malware-related topics, but this clearly tells you that most likely these operations are connected. So, I just summarized our main contributions to the Duqu case. We discovered and named the Duqu, and we created an initial report, a 60 pages long technical report that was later cut down to 30 pages and disclosed as an appendix to the Symantec report, and hence some press people told that Symantec found Duqu, but it is not the case. We just did not reveal even our identity at the first step, and this is how we got into the Symantec report. After that, we had the so-called $1 million question, how the computers were infected by Duqu, because we found the malware, but it is possibly capable to propagate internally in a network, but it is not capable to infect other hosts or other networks. So there should be something that installs this malware. And with the joint work with the victim company, we found a strange email that contained a Microsoft Word document based on a company document that contained the exploit, a zero-day Windows kernel level exploit on true type font handling, and that is capable to install the Duqu by an embedded font. The bad point is that this is so generic that 0 day, first of all the Windows versions were affected, and it is not word specific. So you could make Excel, PDF, HTML, whatever you want, what supports embedded fonts, that can be a carrier for this type of infection. So our work was, by technical means, not that big to really find out that this is the dropper, but still we had some technical difficulties. First of all, for example, to reproduce this infection mechanism. I mean, for example, there was a clue that the trick was that when you opened up this Word document, basically nothing happened. So you played with a Process Explorer and similar, and you did not see that it is already infected the computer similar. Because the real infection, I mean that dropping the files on the computer and starting it up, only occurred after 10 minutes of inactivity when the secretary or whoever goes to the toilet and lets the computer alone. And then even if you know the exact time when the computer was infected, you go to her, for example, and ask what happened at the exact time point of the installation. And she said, oh, I don't remember nothing, because this was the point when she left the room and went to the toilet. And this is why even the slightest steps, the slightest problem is complicated in this case. So we continued our work. Of course, we shared this information with Microsoft, and the problem was handled, and still this exploit is not used in the wild, because we were able to keep it secret. Of course, the secret services that use this exploit also keep it secret. So at the end, nobody uses it in the wild, and this is a good point. I'm really proud of not just our technical work, but the management work, which is, I think, more than 80% of our the total work in the sense. So not the technical work itself is complicated. And what I am proud of, I started to tell, is that I think there is no stakeholder in this case, I mean Duqu Flame and so on, who gets into a much worse position than before. So there is no single agency, company, Iranians or whatever who would blame us that we made something that is very bad for them. Everybody got out from this story, even after finding the exploit and so on, without a big reputation loss or similar. So we continued the work and developed the Duqu detector toolkit, which is, again, by technical means, not a tricky one, so some 100 lines of code, but the focus was that we wanted to formalize or understanding about how Duqu works, and to make some efforts to find out different Duqu versions, if they exist in the wild, or make it more complicated to make one. And therefore we made this tool in an open source format. Hence, for example, in critical infrastructure environment, you cannot really run antivirus product because anything can happen. But this way, you can really check the source code, you can recompile the stuff, you can check if it works correctly, and you can even run in the critical infrastructure environment, as because of Stuxnet, we expected that Duqu can also affect critical infrastructure in fact. So Duqu detector toolkit was downloaded from many places, and they used extensively. I don't know how successfully, because we did not have any feedback, but the fact that we have something like 20 Duqu cases found, and many of them are really partial. They did not find the exact kernel driver and so on. I think that it was successfully used in the Middle East, let's say. Okay, of course, after our work, we got into the press, and we are very happy about that. And especially after the Flame case, we got really good press reports on that and so on. So we are really happy, except in Hungary, because the Hungarian news can only cover that some camel has a new name in a zoo. So otherwise, It is not so important for us that we don't really want to frighten somebody in the countryside, old lady, or that she would be immediately infected by Duqu for some reason. So it is not the case because it is a targeted attack. But we are much more happy about the followings that the professional would also sent us some okay, that was good, guys, type of message. And these are two particular examples. And this is especially good because of the story, we have good connections to them. So I'm really happy that I can really send an email to any big company. I have the particular contact points and they really answer. So if I ask what about this exploit, they will immediately forward me to the appropriate personnel and they will help me. And that's a good way because it is an opportunity to you also that if you have some question or joint work with me, then we have the opportunity to go to the right places, which was not the case before the Duqu. For example, when we first secretly notified some that we have this report on that, we did not really have good connections where to submit. So half of the people on the address list were actually researchers because we had much more connections to researchers when we expected that maybe the industry won't answer us because we are just too small and they don't know us, but the researchers will help us to really reach to the right people. But Symantec was very keen, so they answered, for example, in 2 hours that, or 1 hour, that they immediately started the investigation on Friday, and they will end up the full reverse engineering process on Monday evening. So this is the deadline. Of course, we were happy about that. Okay. So after the Duqu, there was an intermediate incident. This is the Viper attack in Iran. Nobody knows exactly what it was, but there were reports that some malware attacked the oil industry in Iran and deleted some computers. We don't know the exact number. And after that, there was a rush to find out what's happening in Iran again. Of course, everybody expected that Duqu has another, or there are lots of malware like Duqu, and it is not the only malware created by those whoever created it, and we can expect that there are tens of them still out there. But we don't really disclose how it was. But in May, we participated in an international collaboration to investigate a novel malware. We called it Skyviper. Others call it Flame or Flamer. So currently, we also use the name Flame. From the latest reports, it seems that even the programmers use the Flame name because in the CNC servers it is identified as FL letters, and on the CRC servers, for example, there are 3 other cases like SP, SPE, and IP, other malware currently not known. So, first of all, one of the certs in Iran disclosed that they found or they investigated a Flamer, and the next day we and also Kaspersky released details about the Flame malware. Our report was a detailed technical analysis, something again 60 pages long. You can download it and get some idea. Flame, this is a paper, and of course we added some information. For example, particularly interesting is the Windows update mechanism, which is described on the blog site, how it, for example, creates the URL used for the Windows update mechanism. So Flame is again an information stealer. No relationship with PLC code, and a totally different way how they produce the code. The thing is that it has many capabilities like activating the microphone or using Bluetooth or using geolocation of image data to collect information. And it was used in large. I mean, 10,000 of computers were attacked with Flame compared to the 20 that was attacked by Duqu. What is also particularly strange is that, and we had Hungarian victims as well, so this is again a justification that why we should care about that. Because you can say that by doing our work, these investigations, we help Iran, but it is not the truth. With investigating Duqu, we help the European company, we help Taiwanese companies for those who the certificate or the keys were stolen for the particular certificate. And for example, and for Flame, there were also victims in Hungary, so it's a national security problem as well. Flame contains some strange things. It used Lua scripts, high-level Lua scripting language to define attacks, or it used SQLite databases to define the attacks, and even the names of the columns are in the database, so like when to attack, how many times to retry, and similar information. That is really, really strange, and it has a huge command and control infrastructure. I mean, something like 80 domains are related to the CNC servers of Flame. So the whole operation is just too huge, and it is very sophisticated. It contains this very sophisticated attack on the Windows update mechanism based on MD5 hash collision, which might be even novel by cryptographic means. So it really shows that a state-backed or nation-sponsored, state-sponsored attack is the Flame case again. We know, so it's totally different from Duqu. I mean, by technical means, if you compare the code, you can immediately see the differences. It is not like the Duqu and Stuxnet, which is very, very close to each other. But Kaspersky found that actually one version of the Stuxnet code contained exactly the same, almost exactly the same code as Flame contained at some part. But Flame is huge, so this is just a tiny part, but they have a relationship. Then there was another malware in the summer called Gauss. Gauss is basically very similar to Flame, so it belongs to that family, but it has some other mechanisms, but the operation is different. For Flame, most of the victims are from Iran and Sudan. Sudan is very strange because nobody talks about Sudan in the politics, but they have something like 25% of the victims in Sudan for Flame. And Gauss is different because it is the victims are in Lebanon and particularly the Palestinian territories. That means that somebody, and the attack is aiming at to get information about banking stuff and credentials and similar. So somebody really wants to see how the money flows in the Middle East and get to that, which is not so strange if you read about the political problems and how the politics goes on the Iran case or Iran case. Our contribution to the Gauss story. So Gauss was actually identified, discovered, and analyzed by Kaspersky Lab, but on the same day we made an online Gauss detector service, which is just a proof of concept. Again, for technical means not a big deal. We know that the Gauss, for some reason, installs a font called Polida on all computers infected, and by our webpage you can check if the Polida font is installed on your computer, which is of course very interesting for the press, and therefore we had a very good press on that. But if I tell you that you can do that manually by opening the font directory or just opening Word and test if you can select the Polida font, it is not so complicated, you can see. But the thing is that this way, because a lot of people tested their computer by this means, we found something like, or we logged something like 100 positives around the world, but most of them in Lebanon and the US. One summarization about why these malware are so sophisticated, because it is very hard to really tell, and they are actually not. But these things that I summarize here are very good examples that they still have some sophisticated parts. First of all you know, Stuxnet's PLC module. Nobody created a PLC infiltration technique yet, or we don't know about that. So that's surely some novel thing, and to really damage physical infrastructure like the centrifuges themselves. The stolen keys that were used for Stuxnet and Duqu. We can expect that many more stolen keys and signed, not just drivers, but code will be out there done by stolen keys as we use code signing more and more. But these are pioneers in that field. Duqu Windows kernel level TTF exploit is again, so zero-day exploits are always not very common and strange, and this is particularly complicated and very hard to create it. We don't even know how you would start up to fuzz the Windows to find out similar problems at all, to later on elaborate the stuff and find out the whole exploit technique. Flame MD5 collision attack on Windows update mechanism. As I mentioned, maybe they needed a breakthrough in the cryptographic attack against MD5. Maybe they needed so huge computational resources that we cannot really know. For example, before of that, some created MD5 collision attack, but they used 100 PS3 computers for 1 week. And most likely in this case, they had to create many collision attacks to find out one working because of the mechanism how Microsoft signs the certificates. So you cannot use that with 100 PS3 computers, so it is a huge investment for sure. And the Gauss-Gödel module is especially interesting because it contains an encrypted payload which can only be decrypted on the particular victim computer, as the key is computed from the contents of the path environment variable and the directory listing of the program files directory. Which we don't know because we don't know where the victim is. We have 3 samples with such encrypted information inside, so we don't really know what's inside. So, all in all, this is the timeline about our activity. On the upper side, you see the work what we made in this. For some, I did not mention that we made a new Duqu detector, and we had something like a February sample of the Duqu kernel driver used in some places. And down you can see others' work, especially late September. There was Kaspersky-Symantec joint work on the Flame command and control server infrastructure. That's particularly interesting. And of course, the story does not end here. Okay, let's go to the second part. What makes the analysis of malware like Duqu and Flame so different? This is a summarization of the next slides. It is very hard to get samples. The samples are fragmented, so you cannot really expect that somebody goes to you and gives you all the samples and how it works and so on. And here is the next Stuxnet, and you have to do something with that. You have to identify the stuff. You will have missing links and files and stuff in that. So it's it's a process. It is not again a product that you get. So then you cannot get help, or you have to close down the circle that is working on this because you have to keep it secret, and therefore. And of course, because nobody knows about this malware, you cannot find information on Google that, okay, how to debug this particular file. For others like Zeus or whatever, even for a new version, you will have some clues and hints how to start it up, and then it is much easier. No information on the net, as I mentioned. Info sharing is very complicated, so who to trust, what is the sensitive information, how to decide about that, and what is the smallest portion that you can share and still be effective. You have to keep the work in secret if you don't want the agency to go to you and ask you to stop. Maybe if it is not so secret, they won't do that either, but they might stop the operation and whatever. And in some cases, of course, we don't know. So I'm happy to investigate malware that is created by agencies, but you cannot really decide just from the code that if it was created by the US, Israel, or Iran, or North Korea. And this is the bad point. So just from the fact you begin to analyze something new, you cannot really judge if it is friendly or foe. And this is the bad point. And this is the bad point for all. So it is not like the case if you go to the US agencies or whatever, I mean DHS or something, and you tell that we are analyzing something new, and they respond, yeah, that's our product. Because they don't know even. Only those small groups know the truth who created it. And all the others do not know, even in the US. Okay, so you have to keep it secret, hard to reproduce a working copy. So even if you have the samples, it is hard to start it up without proper configuration and so on, and we have complexity problems as well. So hard to get the samples. Of course, if the numbers of the victims are limited, then it is very hard to find it out, especially if, for example, there is a self-killing mechanism, some files are already deleted, it is the case. So for example, this is why the Duqu is very hard to find, and the Flame is much more easy, because if you have 10,000 of victims, then it is much more chance that they will be identified. Again, this is tricky, because maybe that was the reason why they used Flame. They really wanted to be detected, so who knows? It might be a trap, but a strange trap having a zero-day attack, so-called attack on the Windows update mechanism. So looking on the whole operation, it is very, very complicated. Samples are fragmented, partially erased, and so on. So Very hard to do that. And of course, if you want to get help from the others, it is very hard to do that. So one example is the Lua decompiler. When we found all the Lua scripts in the Flame, we used some Lua decompiler made by a Hungarian boy, actually. And I sent him a note that on some files it fails to work successfully. But I could not tell that we are working on a world-class malware and please help us immediately. He modified the code, actually. We found that he is a student of us, and we are very happy to discuss that. And after the disclosure of Flame, we really told him that he participated in a really interesting work, but otherwise it is very problematic. Also, it is very hard to get telemetry with what would justify your work. For example, having it known that something is attacking the Middle East, you can suspect that behind that Western forces or friendly guys are behind that, and you don't have to rush so much or whatever. But how to get information about the victims? Maybe you get some samples and you have the source. Maybe it is just sent by anonymous networks through anonymous interfaces like we have on web page and then on an email. So you get only the telemetry only once the AV industry puts the right signature in the files and it is used widespread and the community edition clicked on, so they got back reports that you were infected. So after that, you know how many victims are out there, but before of that, you cannot really judge it. Or when you start sinkholing the servers, the CNC servers, and see how many victims are trying to connect you. So, again, you need some information and you share some information if it is possible. But for many cases, the victim is not interested to share information because it is just a problem for him and he should reveal the attack against him and so on. But you need many information for working on, and it is hard to collect, hard to share. It is also very hard to define or get the idea who to trust in this case. If you had good connections, and then it is okay, but if you are like in our position, we just started to work and we don't really know too much about this industry. We don't know the people at the start and the beginning, and the trustworthiness. It is very hard to go into that direction. One particular example for information sharing is this piece of Flame malware. So it is a sys file, and a very small one. So we expect that this is a kernel module or driver for Windows. And it's obviously obfuscated or encrypted, as you can see on the hex dump. But what it is and how to share if I don't have a clue about what it is. The general behavior or general way of thinking is that we don't share information if we don't exactly know if it reveals sensitive information about a victim, even not in the AV industry, because possibly the victim don't want to reveal its identity, the company name, whatever, even in the Middle East or whether it is in Europe. The thing is that, okay, but because of the encryption, we don't really know, but we could expect that, okay, we can just share this because it's most likely an encrypted kernel driver, but it is not the case. This particular file, after decompiling, is a configuration data table or something like that for Flame. And as you can see, for example, on the arrow, that it contains a maximum file size parameter there. But what if there is an IP address there? Then it is a sensitive data that reveals the identity of the victim. So you cannot really share this, and you don't have a clue at the first step how to decrypt this piece of information. Maybe nobody can decrypt it ever. One other example is that, for example, when you find out this mechanism on the Windows Update mechanism, Windows Update based infection, then the first module creates an URL and that it sends it to the server to download the main module of the malware. Again, the case is for Flame. The created URL, which we detail in our blog site, is created and contains some information. But what about sharing this URL, especially, for example, the PL parameter somewhere here that begins with lots of separated strings? What it is? As you can see down, that it is actually the process list of the victim computer that reveals sensitive information, possibly. For example, you can see it in our example, we use some VMware machine to create this sample. In fact, it contains also MAC address, IP address, and other Windows version and similar information, just encrypted form or encoded form. So you cannot really share, or you have to delete it from your report. And once you don't really know what it is, very hard to judge what to delete exactly. How many numbers can be left in the code and so on. You can check our reports. For example, we share this type of information without knowing exactly how it works at the first step in Flame, but I guess it did not contain enough information to find out big problems with that. Okay, to keeping it secret, it is a particularly interesting point how you can keep the stuff secret. For example, you cannot use antivirus products because they might have some features to report the infection back, or you have to do it in a network, separated network environment, and after that maybe if you turn the network back, it will report it later, so you have to revert the machine to be sure. You cannot use public websites like VirusTotal to find out information if other antivirus finds it, or you cannot use binary analysis sites because again it might be shared with the attackers, or they will realize that you are working on that. You cannot put information on the web, but you cannot even use Google to find information. Let's say you find some magic number and you are making a Google search on that, and then you possibly click on that, or even the prefetch mechanism loads it somehow. Then the attacker knows that somebody came from Google by finding out the magic number. So your activity is revealed. The attackers already know that you are working on their samples. Very hard to do encryption between companies and so on and so on. It is also very hard to reproduce working copy. For example, on Duqu, this 15 minutes after system start and so on, that the malware does not run if it is not started in the right period of time, so not in that particular month and so on, makes it very hard to reproduce. The Duqu dropper I already mentioned. For Flame, if you don't have the appropriate config files, it won't run possibly, but the appropriate config files cannot be shared because we don't know how much sensitive information is in there, so very, very complicated to work on that. Go back to complexity problems. Duqu had multiple modules. I will show some slide on that. Flame has tens or hundreds of them, and very hard to deal with that and work, especially if you have strong resource constraints. As I mentioned, we don't have too many people at the laboratory. So we found actually two pieces of Duqu, two different versions, and one keylogger. And even the keylogger had an outside executable and something inside that is injected into system processes. So these are almost the same. The trick is that it is complicated, even the startup. It is exactly the same as in Stuxnet. This is the kernel driver that loads by Windows startup, and it actually decrypts a configuration file from itself. After decrypting this configuration file, it has a pointer to a particular registry key. The registry key is then loaded as a binary string and decrypted by the key that was inside this first configuration. So we had a decrypted registry configuration data that points to a file and has another key to use this file and to decrypt that. And finally, we got that decrypted. Then we started up, for example. Then it has two more modules inside the file that will be injected, and another configuration file that is decrypted by this main module itself. So complicated story, multiple modules, but it is just Duqu. For Flame, we have many more modules. I only have this slide, I guess, here. It is a partial list about the internal listing of the what it deletes or what type of files belong to Flame. So not our definition, but what was found in the malware itself as connected modules. And then go back to the complexity. I have some slides about that. So for example, this is the Windows update mechanism. I already told you this URL stuff with the PL string. So this looks like this in IDA Pro. These small black boxes are functions, assembly functions. The purple ones are calls for standard libraries or OS functions. The thing is that it looks complicated, and after disclosure of the stuff and having the samples sent out, still for weeks nobody responded how, for example, this URL mechanism is really working. Most likely they did not even start to work on that. It took some weeks to get more information on that when all the world have known about that. Okay, for the Duqu keylogger, It looks like this, again a bit complicated. We know the main functions, but still there are some clues. For example, one of my students work on that because we know that it saves screenshots, but it saves screenshots in a particular interesting way. So first it saves a full screenshot, that it makes a differential one, but the differential one has an interesting logic. I don't know what protocol they really use. We did not find it as a normal proprietary protocol. They possibly made their own. And we investigated that problem, but others did not. And we have the code, and Duqu was 1 year old, is currently more than 1 year old. This is the Duqu kernel driver. I guess many investigated that, even us, but still some months ago we received some interesting information about some function. That does not mean so much interesting function, but there are details that were never really checked because nobody has so much time to work on all of this. But what about this? How to deal with such a complex code? And this is the Browse 32, which stands for the Flame self-suicide module. So it is downloaded from the command and control server. It has a list of affected files, and it deletes them from the computer. And that's it's all a function what we know. But then why to have a 400 kilobyte code for this particular suicide mechanism? We don't really know. I don't really know what's inside. I got no information. And it is from June or something. You can get this piece and analyze this. And I did not read anything interesting on that. Or what about this? This is one of the internal parts of the Duqu main module. Okay, most likely we know much about that, possibly. Most of the functions are already covered, but still strange. The reason might be that there are just too many static libraries compiled in or linked in to this file, but still very hard job, and it is not the typical way how you work with this type of malware, and you have to judge which is the point when you stop your work and share with others to let them work. Okay, I don't know how much time I have. I guess very close to the end, but some words about this. So what skills are needed for such investigations? What is the difference from the normal malware? You can read this to be short. The thing is that you have to have many properties, knowledge, and so on, but not so deep in each. I mean, for example, you have to know how to do forensics, but you don't have to be forensics expert. You have to know how the cryptography works, but most of the time you don't have to be a cryptographic expert in that sense. So you have to know the basics to survive and to go forward, but not to do everything. You have to be a good programmer in that sense that you have to be very fast to make some 10 lines of Perl code or Python or whatever, what you need for the analysis. But you don't have to be a great programmer who writes 10,000s of lines, because you most likely don't need that. And so on and so on, and you need some information on networking, tactics, and also experience and similar stuff. I already mentioned that much of the work was non-technical information sharing, what to tell, what information is received, how to deal with Twitter, the press, all the newspapers, how to follow that, save that, extract the right information, because it is just too much information out there in the internet. Okay, so basically I just summarize the results. We have these references on our analysis, the paper, Duqu detector, Skywiper or Flame analysis, the online Duqu detector or the crisis block site. And in summary, working with unknown targeted malware is very problematic. A lot of attention and other type of work is needed to avoid problems occurring. You need to solve non-technical problems. You have to expect the unexpected. So at the first step, you don't really see if it is important to save forensics data, but at the end, it would be so good to have some full, I don't know, network sniff from that particular time or whatever. So you have to be prepared for all this stuff. And of course, there is a room for innovation in the defensive security technology to avoid further problems, especially in all critical infrastructure in the Western world. So that's all, and thank you for the attention, and if you have questions, I'm happy to answer.
After crisis got exposed and its name became public, did you get any targeted attack from someone?
No, actually we don't know. So if they are so clever, they attacked us and we could not figure it out that it is possible. But I expected attacks, but we were not particularly aware of big attacks. We have some reasoning on that because the Secret Service is secret. That means they don't really like to actively attack. They don't know who are behind us. So one Secret Service don't want to reveal the tactics to the other, whatever. But in the end, we are not aware too many attacks. And I hope you won't do that either. Well, any other question?
Which the people in Iran use your tool for protecting themselves from hackers? Do you know about it?
We know that they use it because it is on the in Farsi or Persian language, some web page that please download this and run. But otherwise, we don't know exactly what happened there. But we know about the found Duqu cases, and it is interesting because most likely it is not detected by normal means. I mean by AV.
Did you get many downloads from Iran?
We got, what is interesting, we got for all this stuff, strange downloads from CIA.gov or .mil infrastructure or so strange countries like Cameroon or whatever. But what was strange after that, we looked back on the Stuxnet slide. So at some time point, somebody asked, what is the relation between Stuxnet and Configure? And I said, in my slides, I used both in the lectures for network security because Configure is also interesting. So before of Duqu, I already started to teach about Stuxnet because it was so interesting. And we had some Stuxnet slides on our university webpage. And what I found later, that I checked back the logs, and these Stuxnet slides were already downloaded from strange places like Korea and similar. And these are even not the strangest. So, you know, downloading from CIA.gov or similar is just normal. When downloads come from IP addresses in Arizona without reverse lookup and similar, those are the strange places. Anyhow, so of course, I guess everybody is interested in the story, but we don't have a conclusion. I mean, nobody knows, nobody is an oracle in this sense. Nobody knows what will happen. We are just on the wild west currently and everything is forming. Any other question? I guess we don't have too much time, so thank you again and see you next time.